This is the story of Mr. Ado's family. You see, Mr. Ado used to be one of the big businessmen in Lagos. He was married to a very beautiful woman. Her name was Obi, and together Mr. and Mrs. Ado had 8 children. The family of Mr. Ado lived in a very big house. They lived in a house so big it felt like a palace. Life was sweet, the money was flowing, and everyone assumed the good times would last forever. And because Mr. Ado could afford it, he had most of his relatives live with him every once in a while. But life has a way of humbling people. From one bad investment to another, Mr. Ado's finances began to crumble. His contacts dried up, debts began to pile up, and the once successful businessman found himself struggling to keep up with day-to-day expenses. It wasn't very long before Mr. Ado started to sell his properties. He started selling his cars and eventually the house and even some of their personal belongings. Eventually, the family had to move from their big home in Lekki to a 1-bedroom apartment in Mushin. The shift was shocking to everyone around them. A whole family of 10 squeezed into a small, stuffy space. It was in these cramped settings that Uncle Andy became a permanent fixture in their lives. Uncle Andy was one of Mr. Ado's younger cousins who had come to stay with them when the times were good. Now, when everything fell apart, instead of him leaving, Uncle Andy stayed. He was not contributing much to the welfare of the family, but he acted like he belonged. And because every little penny mattered to Mr. and Mrs. Ado, they let him stay. At first, Andy was just the uncle who was always around. But as the days turned into weeks, he started getting too comfortable in their house. In the small 1-bedroom apartments, privacy was a luxury they couldn't afford. So everyone just slept on one thin mattress laid out on the bare floor. It was during one of these nights that Uncle Andy began to cross the line. He would wait until everyone was asleep, and then he would touch the girls in inappropriate places under the pretense of trying to adjust their covers or finding his spot on the crowded floor. This continued from days, and days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The girls didn't know what to do. They were too young to fully understand what was happening, but they knew it felt wrong. However, fear kept them silent. Who would believe them? After all, Uncle Andy was family. He had started contributing to the well-being of the home, and their parents already had so much to worry about. But it was Dee, the eldest daughter, who finally spoke up. One night, after Uncle Andy had once again crossed the line, she couldn't hold it in anymore. She waited until morning, and then she pulled her mother aside. She said, "Mama, I need to tell you something," she said with her voice shaking. She explained everything that Uncle Andy had been doing and how her sisters were so scared and they couldn't speak, and how it had been happening for months. Obi was stunned. At first, she didn't even know what to say. When she told her husband, he exploded in anger. He confronted Andy right there in the room, shouting loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Of course, Uncle Andy denied everything at first, but when Mr. Ado's rage grew, he gathered a crowd and they beat up Uncle Andy, and finally, he admitted to his crimes. And that was the end of Uncle Andy's stay in the house. Mr. Ado threw him out immediately with no explanations and no second chances. But even though Uncle Andy was gone, the damage he had caused lingered. The girls were not the same. They carried the weight of what happened. Their innocence was stolen in the very place where they should have felt the safest. As they grew older, the pain showed in their lives in different ways. Some became withdrawn, while the others sought attention and love in all the wrong places. As time went on, the girls went on living their lives just the way they deemed fit. And eventually, 2 of the girls fell pregnant. One of them had already gone to a friend to terminate the pregnancy, afraid of how their father would react. The other one was still struggling with the decision. When Obi found out, she broke down in tears. It felt like the family's troubles had no end. That evening, they all sat together as a family. It wasn't easy. Nobody wanted to speak at first, but slowly, the truth started to come out. The girls shared how Uncle Andy's actions had affected them, how it made them feel worthless, and how they struggled to heal from it. Mr. and Mrs. Ado listened with heavy hearts, guilt, and sorrow. They eventually apologized to their daughters, promising to do better, to be there for them no matter what. The journey to healing was not quick or easy. The family struggled with their past, but they took small steps towards rebuilding their trust and love for one another. In the end, the Ado family learned that even when life takes everything from you, the love and bond of a family can be the foundation for starting over.